All right, let's dive into something that sounds, well, completely backward. We're going to talk about how the entire field of logic, the science of making a good argument, was actually born from the practice of making really, really bad ones.
I mean, you know that feeling, right? You walk away from a debate or a conversation, and you just can't shake this feeling that something was off. You lost, but not because you were wrong. No, it feels like you were just outplayed, tricked by some clever-sounding point that was actually totally hollow.
Well, guess what? You're not the first person to feel that way, not by a long shot. People have been dealing with this for thousands of years. And the ancient Greeks, they didn't just have a word for it, they practically built an entire intellectual tradition to fight it.
And to get to the bottom of this, we've got to go back in time and meet the original spin doctors, the absolute masters of the deceptive argument. I'm talking about a group of thinkers called the Sophists.
So who were these guys? The Sophists were basically professional teachers in ancient Greece, and they were brilliant at rhetoric, the art of persuasion. But, and this is a big but, their brilliance was super controversial. They were the OGs of logical errors and fallacies. I mean, they were so good at crafting these tricky, deceptive arguments, sometimes called treacherous sophistry, that their very existence kind of forced everyone else to stop and think, wait a minute, what does a good argument even look like?
Okay, so what is this art of deception really? What's the difference between this sophistry and, just making a simple mistake in an argument?
Here's the key. Sophistry is all about the intentional misuse of reasoning. See, it's not just about being wrong. It's about knowingly using bad logic to win a debate or to get an audience on your side. And you can really see the difference when you look at their goals. A philosopher, right, they want to persuade you. They're going to use reason, use logic, lay out their case step by step to lead you to a solid conclusion. But a sophist, they have a totally different goal. They just want to instill belief. They don't care about sound logic. They just need you to feel like they're right. And they'll do it by hitting you with appeals to emotion or your gut feelings.
And this is a point that Aristotle really hammered home. He said, look, being a sophist isn't about being dumb or unskilled. It's about intention. It's all about your intention. It's the choice you make. Are you using your arguments like a weapon to win at all costs, or are you using them like a tool to find the truth?
The Greeks were actually super precise about this. They had two different words for this stuff. If you make an honest mistake in your reasoning, something we all do, that's called a paralogism. No big deal. But if you make a logical error on purpose, with the intent to trick someone, that is a sophism. And that's the whole ballgame right there.
So you can imagine, the rise of sophistry created this huge problem in ancient Athens. I mean, if anyone can win any argument just by using clever tricks, how do you ever figure out what's actually true? It was a crisis, really. And it sparked a massive intellectual counterattack.
Now, this fight back didn't happen all at once. It was a process. Kind of ironically, some of the sophists themselves, a guy named Perdiccas, were among the first to say, hey, we need to use correct speech and proper concepts. Then, of course, you get Plato, who spends a ton of time in his famous dialogues just tearing sophistry apart. But the real heavy hitter was his student, Aristotle. He's the one who finally sat down and created a full, systematic analysis of all these logical fallacies.
And this project Aristotle took on, it wasn't just some dusty academic exercise. This was a huge deal. It was the very thing that forged the rules of logic that we still use today.
So Aristotle needed a name for these tricky arguments, these things that look like real proof but are totally empty inside. And the name he came up with was perfect: imaginary proofs. It just captures it so well, doesn't it? An argument that has the shape and the sound of a real proof, but when you look closer, it's just an illusion.
Okay, so let's just break down how this all happened. First, you have the problem. The sophists flood the public square with all these imaginary proofs. This creates an urgent need for people to figure out how these fake arguments actually work. So what happens next? Aristotle steps in and does this deep analysis. He literally takes these fallacies apart, piece by piece, like he's deconstructing an engine. And in doing that, he finds the solution. Because once you understand exactly what makes a proof fake, you can finally create a scientific theory of what makes a proof real. And boom, that's the birth of formal logic.
And that brings us to the really incredible and kind of funny conclusion to this whole story. The villains who created this mess, well, they turned out to be absolutely essential for creating the solution.
I mean, this is the great paradox, right? Think about it. Without the sophists and their masterful deception, there would have been no pressure, no urgent need for philosophy to get its act together and figure this stuff out.
Logic wasn't invented in some quiet, peaceful library. No way. It was forged in the heat of battle, in the intellectual fight against bad faith arguments.
The modern logician Everett Beth put it beautifully. He said, sophistry was condemned to merge into logic. It was inevitable. The very act of studying deception forces you to build a stronger, more rigorous system to fight it. It's like you just can't fight shadows without inventing a brighter light.
So, next time you're watching a debate, or scrolling through social media, or even just listening to an ad, and you get that feeling, that little alarm bell in your head that says something isn't quite right, remember the sophists. This fight for clear, honest thinking started more than 2,000 years ago. And now the question is, can you carry on that tradition? Can you spot the sophistry, the imaginary proofs out there in the wild?